Say a few words about Iran's missile attack on Israel today. At my direction, the United States military actively supported the defense of Israel, and we're still assessing the impact. But based on what we know now, the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. And this is testament to Israeli military capability and U.S. military. It's also a testament to intensive planning between the United States and Israel to anticipate and defend against the brazen attack we expected. Make no mistake, the United States is fully supportive of Israel. And I've been spent the morning and part of the afternoon in the Situation Room and meeting with my whole national security team and consulting with the Israelis indirectly because in terms of their impact on us. And the national security team has been, as I said, in constant contact with Israeli officials and their counterparts. And it's going to continue to be brought to me throughout the day. We're still out to share updates when we get them, and we will do that.
It has begun. Iran has launched over 180 missiles into Tel Aviv and Hebron in Israel in response to the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah from Lebanon. What does this mean for the long run? And what does this mean for now? I'm going to talk about both of those things and read from the latest news. And also, I'm going to put up a scenario that possibly could happen as well, and people are forgetting. So let's continue with the news here today. And as you could see, Iran fires at least 180 missiles into Israel as region-wide conflict grows. Iran launched at least 180 missiles into Israel on Tuesday, the latest in a series of escalating attacks in a year-long conflict between Israel and Iran and its Arab allies that threatened to push the Middle East closer toward a region-wide war. Now, on my old channel, on the latest news playlist, I made a couple of videos starting in after the October 7th attacks by Hamas that along the way, this will lead to a war with Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. Well, what I said wasn't some secret. It was obvious to anybody, even less than a layman. And that this issue has always been warranted by Israel with the silence of the Gulf. Now, yes, Saudi Arabia basically walked out on Netanyahu when he gave a speech before the United Nations. However, that's all they're going to do. They're not going to get involved. Going back to 1938, Saudi Arabia and the United States made a pact between the two countries. The Saudis have always voiced their criticisms of Israel's handling of the Palestinian people, but they have never done anything, never intervened. But they have voiced their concerns, which basically turn out to be nothing. So don't get help from the Gulf. Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia are not going to do anything. The orange globe missile streaked toward Israel with night sky as the air raid sirens sounded and residents scrambled into bomb shelters. Israel vowed retaliation for Iran's barrage, which it said had caused only a few injuries. Before Iran's attack, Israel has landed a series of devastating blows in recent weeks against the leadership of Hezbollah in Lebanon. It then ratcheted up the pressure on the Iran-backed militant group, which has been firing rockets in Israel since the war in Gaza began, by launching what it said is a limited ground incursion in southern Lebanon. Notice that far more civilians were killed with Israeli strikes than there were with rocket attacks into Israel. In fact, the rockets basically hit all the military outposts that they targeted in Hebron and Tel Aviv, even bombing an airport. Now, Hamas also on today committed a terrorist attack on civilians in Israel. I'm against that because there are people in Israel who are innocent, who just want to live in peace and stability and harmony with their fellow Arab citizens. Remember, this is not a war against the entire population of Israel. This is a war against the government and its military. Israel has said it will continue to strike Hezbollah until its safe for citizens displaced from homes near the Lebanon border to return. Hezbollah has vowed to keep firing rockets into Israel until there is a ceasefire in Gaza with Hamas, which is also supported by Iran. Notice how Israel is not attacking ISIS. Notice how Israel is not attacking Al Qaeda. Notice how Israel is not attacking the Taliban. These are the groups who committed the more terrorist attacks than Hezbollah or Hamas combined. Iran has never attacked another country in over 100 years. Afghanistan, well, Al Qaeda bases are there. However, this is an issue that will come back to haunt us because the countries that we are destabilizing in the Middle East have been the countries that have destabilized the Salafists in Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan and Pakistan. Libya, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon have all fought against these radical Islamists, whom the CIA seems to back each and every time almost. We saw this with the program Timber Sycamore in Syria, where Jordan, Israel, and the United States, along with Saudi Arabia, funded and financed the Islamic militants in Syria to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. Say what you want about Assad. However, he was fighting against the militants. Weren't we supposed to fight the war on terror, not against Israel and Saudi Arabia's preconceived enemies? And their enemies, why? Because of politics and religion. Israel just hates the entire Arab continent, Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa. Saudi Arabia just hates the Shia Muslims because of religious indifference. So in other words, with the silence of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf and the aggression from Israel and the pressure that the AIPAC, American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, has on Congress, pressures the United States to basically accelerate these attacks. I mean, for God's sakes, have you heard the State Department's press briefings the last couple of days denying every atrocity by Israel regarding West Bank and Gaza, regarding Lebanon, regarding Syria? So what is the White House response? According to the Washington Post, White House vows consequences for Iran's attack on Israel. Obvious. Why? Because the majority of Congress, the Democrats and Republicans, are sold out to AIPAC money. Probably blackmail, too. God knows what the Israeli spies inside the United States collected on these people. Who knows? Maybe there isn't anything. But nevertheless, even if they don't have anything, they spend millions of dollars trying to influence our American politicians who are sending money to countries like Israel, Egypt, Ukraine, Saudi Arabia with their war on Yemen, Ukraine with their conflict with Russia, Israel with their conflict against Lebanon, Syria, and soon to be Iran, and of course the Palestinians in Gaza. Now, where does this money come from? Well, it comes from all over the place. But to save you time, the Department of Defense and the private military industrial complex, companies like Raytheon, LG3 Technologies, Boeing, are making hand over fist. And a lot of these private donors who back people like Trump and Kamala Harris are wanting this conflict to continue. Tehran will face severe consequences for its large-scale missile attack on Israel Tuesday, The White House said after the United States employed military force to help defend its closest Middle Eastern ally from Iranian fire for the second time in 5 months. Now, look, way before 5 months ago, the United States naval fleets have been near the Mediterranean Sea, trying to basically cut off the ports. And what happened is that we have a bunch of, say, false flags trying to blame Iran for bombing these ships, oil ships, basically. Ports like Bandar Abbas and Bandar Aman, Hussein Chabar, Horashar, Lavar Island. And these ports are key because they receive goods from countries like Syria and Lebanon, who are allies to Iran. They want to block off the Straits of Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman, as well as the Persian Gulf, to try and capture the Caspian Sea, where the Caspian Sea has a whole lot of reserved oil fields untouched. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and the barrage of nearly 200 ballistic missiles fired at Israel late Tuesday, only the second time Iran has launched a direct attack on the Jewish state, represented a significant escalation. He and President Biden was closely tracking the developments as spiraling violence threatens to undermine one of the U.S. leader's chief foreign policy goals, preventing an all-out war across the Middle East. We're now going to look at what the appropriate steps next are to secure, first and foremost, American interests, which is Israel, then to end Saudi Arabia, and then to promote stability to the maximum extent possible as we go forward, which is a bunch of shit. Because Biden and Sullivan and even the Republicans like Tom Cotton and Lindsey Graham and the prick Brian Mast, they're all Israeli born. So it doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican. It doesn't matter. There's going to be no stability. These people are liars. They're criminals. They're not emphatic to the human condition. They're apathetic to most of society, here and abroad. He declined to say what form the promised repercussions on Iran, already the object of extensive American sanctions, would take. It made clear that there will be consequences, severe consequences, he said. We will work with Israel to make that the case. Sullivan spoke directly after American destroyers in the eastern Mediterranean Sea shot down multiple missiles launched by Iran, according to U.S. defense officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the operation. Pentagon Press Secretary Major General Pat Ryder told reporters after the attack that the two U.S. warships, the USS Bulkley and USS Cole, fired about a dozen interceptors at inbound ballistic missiles. Said officials were still assessing how many of them struck a target. The comments suggest that Israel, with its extensive air defense network, shot down most of the incoming munitions on its own, which is full of shit because there are videos out there that show many of the missiles hitting their targets in Israel. Now, what does this mean for the long run? Depends on the severity of the aggression of the United States and Israel. If they conduct an open engagement to war, they'll basically commit to a war that will have devastating consequences. Now, this is how the president can get approval for war only. Declaration of war, in which Congress has the sole power to declare war, which gives the president the full use of its military. Statutory authorization. Congress can authorize the president to use military force through a statutory authorization, which can be more informal than, say, a declaration of war. And then you have national emergency, where the president can use military force in response to an attack on the United States or its citizens or forces abroad. Now, the War Powers Resolution of 1973 requires the president to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing armed forces to military action. The resolution also limits the amount of time the military can remain in action without congressional authorization. However, presidents have often considered the War Powers Resolution Act to be unconstitutional and not followed it. For example, you have Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution, which grants Congress the power to declare war, in which the president derives the power to direct the military after a congressional declaration of war from Article 2, Section 2, in which the presidential power is titled as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. Now, will we see this formal declaration of war? Or will we see a national emergency? Will we see statutory authorization? Probably not. And it's really not obvious from here on out what the United States and Israel want. And that is the total destabilization of the Shia minority countries that will fight against the Wahhabi extremists. But on the flip side of that coin, a scenario which has basically gone ignored, except for the few experts who have talked about it, like Sarah Adams and Bill Braggio, who basically have warned the United States that right now, currently, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban are forming a government in Afghanistan. Remember, the Biden administration have left behind billions in weapons into a country that they knew the Taliban was taking over. Al-Qaeda comes in, form a government with the Taliban. The youth are being brainwashed with this ridiculous Salafist mindset, abridge the Quran, and go by just by the hadiths, where future generations will just pump out militants. And here's a scenario that, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's a possibility. The United States conducts a war with Iran, Syria, and Lebanon. I could see Al-Qaeda militants, Taliban militants, even Hezbollah militants entering the country through our porous borders in Canada and Mexico. Who knows? They may not even be here, but they could be here, just like with 9/11. And I won't say that they're going to hijack planes. They won't do the same thing twice. They'll do something different. Say, for example, sporadic attacks in, say, a densely populated area like Times Square. Gunmen shooting down people in the middle of the street. Later on, blamed on Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or Hezbollah, or a combination of all three. If that happens, it'll be a full-scale war between Afghanistan, Iran, Lebanon, Syria. It will be a disaster. A disaster the United States financially will not recover from. Because a war with Iran is basically a death sentence for the financial industries here in the United States, which is already in dire straits. With inflation, rent prices, and now a union strike for cargo ships entering the country, in which basic goods and services incoming are going to be few and few, and the people won't get what they need, and then they'll start rioting. Take a hint of what happened with COVID, where we had people just buying all the wipes and all the paper towels, leaving nothing behind, buying in bulk. Fuck everybody else, because the majority of people in this country are stupid and ignorant. I'm not saying I'm smarter than anybody else. I'm stupid and ignorant. But at the same time, it's this level of debasement and mental affliction brought on by the U.S. government's lack of empathy for the American people as well as humanity worldwide that led to this situation. So what the people need to do is basically stop looking at each other as if they're an alien on a different planet. And I think, and I brought this up before, and it sounds like a broken record, I will repeat that human constructs, ideologies such as politics, sexism, racism, religion, and not all religion, but the monotheisms, are basically dividing us, keeping us at bay, away from each other, like social distancing did with COVID. And look how many people acquiesced to that. Don't say it ain't going to happen to me, because it did. The majority of people did. We need to band together. We need to peacefully protest. Hurt them in their pockets, because that's what matters. Hurt them. Don't go to work for a week. It's hard. It'll be hard. But if we can get enough people, 5 million, it could change the whole paradigm. Chris Hedges once said that 5 million people will make a difference. It'll change the government. But we have to be on the same side. People who are from the left and right, who believe they are left and right, who believe they're black and white, who believe that they're Christian, Muslim, and Jew, to form as one. Because the people who are being hurt in this conflict here with these domestic issues are common people. You know who's not being hurt? The government. Because they want this to happen. They hate us. Biden doesn't care. Kamala Harris doesn't care. Donald Trump could give a shit. Trump hates his followers, hates them. That's why he says so many lies. Because they'll believe anything. Whereas the left will just be a little bit smarter about it. But they're still just as brainwashed and manipulated as their brethren on the other side. And I'm anti-government. I will speak out against the government till the day I am dead, or I can't speak anymore. Because we're a nation run by a bunch of sellouts to Israeli money and also to the military-industrial complex and to the Department of Defense and to U.S. interests abroad. War. War brings out the worst in people. But from the worst, like the rising phoenix, comes the best. And who are the best? Let's wait and see. All right, guys, listen, thank you very much for watching. And keep up the fight. Write an article. Do a video on your own. Even if you don't like the sound of your voice, like myself, I hate my accent. It's what's here that counts, here and here. Make a difference. You may think it's not making a difference, but if enough people speak out, we can. See you in the next video, everybody. Take care.